welcome to this 43rd episode of the Hasura Community Call. My name is Ron Dominguez. I am an engineer here at Hasura, and if you've been on these calls before, you've seen me as your community call host. I'm going to run through the agenda that we have for us today. We've got a lot going on, which is no surprise for anyone that's been here before. We're going to start by taking a broad overview of our product roadmap with our VP of Engineering and our Principal Product Manager for Hasura V3 or Hasura DDN. Additionally, we're going to go through and talk about some things that I think are going to be really exciting to a lot of people, like local development and self-hosting, and what those iteration and collaboration life cycles can look like. Additionally, we have some demos today regarding native queries, some updates that are happening on Elasticsearch, and then a couple other things like permissions RFC for V3. And as Jeff just hopped on the screen with me right now, he's going to go hang out backstage in a second, but he'll be our customer showcase at the end of this entire talk. So let me go ahead and jump to our first slide. We're going to have the product roadmap with Manas and Rahul. The two of you folks go ahead and join me up on stage. We'll get started from there.
Thank you, Rob. Hi, everyone. As you might have known from the last community call, we recently launched DDN base in beta, and we are planning to go GA in the coming weeks and add a lot of functionality to DDN, bring the V2 features to V3, and not even achieve parity, but also look to provide a better enhanced experience. Because of the new architecture we have in DDN, there's an opportunity for us to bring a new thought process around some of the new features and focus on innovation. For example, due to the metadata structure we have in DDN and the declarative authoring approach we are able to provide any-to-any join right away, as compared to V2, where data source, actions, and remote schemas worked in a different disjointed manner. And to make sure we are collaborating with you, we want to showcase our plan and progress in public. And that's what I'm going to hand over to Manas, where he's going to provide updates on our public roadmap on GitHub. Manas?
Yeah, thanks, Rahul. Yeah, I'm in general, I think the whole team, I can say on behalf of the whole team that we're excited about launching DDN and what we're going to build next in the V3 world. I think, but the key thing I want to kind of highlight is, as part of the operating model of Hasura Engineering, we want to be much closer to the community and much more earlier in terms of what we are sharing, what we are building, and taking feedback. And like in my mind, it just also makes sense because the approach to V3 has been very much like as a framework that can be extended very easily. Like we have always talked about interfaces, specifications like OpenEDS, NDC spec, and while we are building like mature implementations of different databases, different features over these specs, we want to kind of share how we have thought about these specs in the first place and what kind of thoughts have been happening in our mind, so that the whole community and champions and who want to kind of take this forward and build their own things. And yeah, so we are here. We want to talk about our roadmap a bit. What are the next things in our minds? And just quickly go through this. I think Rahul is already sharing a roadmap. I think this link we'll share it over here with the community already. Did we? Cool. Yeah, let's just share with everyone here. But this link is public. This roadmap is public for everybody to review. Key thing here is the way we kind of categorize the top tracks of work that is happening and the things that we want to do. Most of the work was the key thing that you see will be around API engine, because that's where we kind of building core set of features that enables your GraphQL and generally the API story, the composability outcomes that you want to kind of want to get from Hasura. Postgres is implemented as connector. If you have remembered in the V2 world, the later set of databases were kind of launched as connectors. In V3, everything is a connector, and Postgres remains the core thing that we kind of implement as the first database that we implement against a particular specification. So we want to share what more things we want to kind of add in terms of the Postgres story. business logic is a very important focus for us in V3. We have heard everyone that it's so hard to kind of get business logic inside Hasura, and then there's always something that you want to do big and small while we are querying data and while you are building your APIs. And what if it becomes very easy to kind of just do it within Hasura ecosystem? And we have done that. I think you have seen from our past community calls, we've done that with our TypeScript connector. And here we kind of want to bring a lot more stuff that makes our life easier in terms of doing more with Hasura APIs. The sections around how you kind of build with Hasura using our CLI, console, the toolings that are available. Federation is an interesting section as well, and I hope in the next month, in the month of June, we'll have more things to kind of share. And I think this is a key piece where we want to kind of enable multiple teams to work across different subgraphs, different data models that you have brought in, and work together in a collaborative manner and kind of keep developing and growing the API kind of surface. And then you have set up things around what connector we are launching next, what more we're doing in different kind of connectors around different databases. That's how we kind of have categorized over here. And this is a very early draft. This is things that are top of our mind if you expand it and open it, and we'll go through it in this call as well. And we'll keep on adding stuff over here. And we'll keep on kind of refining this based on the enhancement issues that the community is kind of creating around V3, and even with V2 that we think can be solved in a great way with V3. So yeah, this is our roadmap, and we hope to kind of keep refining this and keep sharing all the up-to-date information around what we're building next, and keep taking feedback. Rahul, I think over to you for what are the things we are doing on the API side.
Yes, and building on what Mana said, we highly recommend that you browse through these issues and engage with us with your use cases, comment, and we want to make sure that we are building in public as much as possible. And talking about API features, we do need to catch up on some of the very widely used and loved V2 features such as aggregations. And so that is something which is in progress right now. And we do have a point of view for group by, which we are thinking of adding to the aggregations API in V3. So have a watch out for that, with the thing in progress. And then also with DDN being the best way to implement a supergraph, we want to double down on this approach of building a supergraph and enabling superior API composability. The power of a relationship, we want to make sure that once you add a relationship, you're able to get a lot of orchestration, a lot of functionality for free. And that is why we have features like remote relationship predicates, subscriptions, and a lot of work on authorization, which Abhinav will showcase later in the call today. Those are things which are planned as well. And lastly, I want to touch base on the plugin framework for V3 engine. With this, we want to kind of say that Hasura is kind of evolving as an API platform and adding these lifecycle hooks for you to extend the functionality of the V3 engine. Much open architecture, and we want the community to build their own plugins. We will provide certain Hasura plugins for popular functionality, but this plugin framework is something which is we're working to enable more extensibility on the V3 engine front. And lastly, on Postgres, support for simple mutations is in progress and going to be launched soon. So with that, you'll have the full CRUD capabilities, ease of use way of leveraging CRUD capabilities on DDN. With that, Manas, you want to touch base on business logic and federation?
Yeah, I think I was talking about business logic. I think one thing that stands out here, and I hope like we'll have a good RFC or a point of view to share. And if you open the federated mutations part, this is a big problem statement spread across different kind of user stories that we want to kind of capture and tackle it well in V3. And I think a lot of us who has worked with Hasura kind of have gone through these situations and want to see like what we can do in a great way, right? And I'm kind of excited about this. It's something very new, very different that we want to do. We are internally discussing this a lot, and looking forward to like what is the first cut of things that we want to do, and sharing more once we have a better understanding of this. I hope hopefully next community call we have something around this. Yeah, and I was talking about Federation. Federation at this stage is a cloud feature, which is available in free tier, maybe in some way. But I think we want to kind of talk about what kind of things we want to do in terms of our CI/CD, uh, in terms of when we kind of want to work across teams, and we want to share again the things that we kind of solve over here. So yeah, these are the things here, and then connectors you can always follow as my favorite connector next in my roadmap. If it's there, for example, we're going to talk about Elasticsearch. But if you have something next in your mind, you can always find it in the roadmap over here. I think Rahul, you want to probably talk about GraphQL connector, which is an interesting one.
Yeah, so GraphQL connector, we're going to be similar to the remote schema functionality in V2. So think of bringing a GraphQL as a data source in DDN via a GraphQL connector. And we also, for V2 users on the call, this would be a good way for you to evaluate DDN while running your V2 project. So this is something we are trying to get out in June as well. So in the next community call, hopefully we'll be able to show you a demo. And also MongoDB, just want to touch base on that, saying it's an important track for us from an investment point of view going forward. And that's why new features coming on MongoDB as well. So have a look out for Brandon's demo later in the call today on new native query experience and features around MongoDB. So with that, I hope you get a good sense of where our efforts and focus is on, and please share with us any feedback, and we'd like you to engage and make it a collaborative exercise as we get these features out. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks to both of you guys. I think just to kind of double down on what Rahul said there at the end, we are looking to engage the community as much as possible. So please go check out these projects on GitHub. Give us your feedback, give us your points of view. We want to build in public as much as possible with all of these things. And with that note, whoever's sharing screen, if you wouldn't mind unsharing, thank you so much. Let me go ahead and throw back up our presentation. Our next step is going to be talking about local development and self-hosting. So I'll bring on a familiar face, Akshaya, to this call. If you'll go ahead and join me on stage, we'll talk a little bit about what's going to be happening and what demo we're going to see with you today. Akshaya, how are you?
Hey, hi, I'm good, thanks. Hope everyone else is doing well.
Yeah.
Getting into this, I think last community call we looked at local development and self-hosting. So just a quick recap. Whenever you use the DX tooling and you add any connector or the engine itself, for local development, it's actually entirely Docker-based. And the tooling itself will write out these Docker compose files. So you can then go ahead and run the entire Hasura system on your local machine. Every connector you add also will come with its own Docker compose file. And that's pretty much all you need. And once you're done with this local development, if you want to self-host your entire Hasura setup, all you need to do is take these containers, package them up, and then you can put them pretty much wherever you want and continue running them. So here, what I have is a running Hasura project that I'm running using Docker Compose on my local machine. Okay, so today I want to go a little bit further and speak about the API development workflow. So an API is most commonly used when one team needs to communicate with another team or even between systems, right? And during development of an API, there's a lot of collaboration and a lot of feedback that comes in. So what's the most effective way to iterate on an API? And that's something I want to get into a little bit today. So we're going to do this with an example. Let's say I'm developing a leaderboard application. So what's the first, and I just want one API endpoint for this leaderboard, right? That maybe gives me an sorted list of users. So what might I do if I'm trying to build this for consumption by a different team? Well, I might reach for a Google Doc or my internal wiki and begin writing stuff down, begin trying to document my API, and then maybe people can come there and comment and stuff. But could we make this more efficient? Ideally, what I'd like to do is be able to implement that API and get that out and get people's comments on that. And we all know that when people actually use an API, that's when a lot of the feedback begins coming in. That's when a lot of the changes need to happen because that discovery really happens in the usage. So let's go through this with an example and see how some of the tooling we're built out can actually enable these efficient workflows. So I'm going to go ahead and set up a simple leaderboard endpoint. And then what I'm going to do is go ahead and just build my local API. All right. And now if I go to the console, and by the way, the console works for local development as well. You can see the console is pointed to a localhost URL. Just going to hit refresh. And I can see that I have my new endpoint. So sure, I can go ahead and I can run it. All the good stuff about Explorer is also here. So I can go through my entire project. And now I want to share this API with someone else, but I want to share it with them in an executable form. So the simplest way to share this API is to build it on the Hasura DDN, which is on the cloud. So I'm just going to quickly go ahead and do that.
Actually, just to talk about what's happening in the background right now, right? So earlier, the build that we did was local on our machine. So that was creating that image there, and we were serving it off of our local host, but accessing it from the cloud console. And what we're doing now, right, is actually doing a build and deploying to Hasura DDN, so it's available outside of our machine or off of our machine.
The good thing about this is, what we'll see in a moment, is that we're going to get a build URL that represents this particular build. So Hasura builds are immutable. So if I click through this URL, so you can sort of see over here the API URL has the build ID in it, which means this build ID is now never going to change. It's immutable. So even if I continue to make other builds or continue to iterate on my project, this build will never change. So I'm going to go ahead and just click through and open this in the console. And we can see that the same application is now in the console. So at this point, I might take this console URL and then go ahead and make a pull request. Let me see if I can quickly do that. And then over here, I can go ahead and paste in my API itself. So now anyone who really wants to use this API and sort of figure it out, right? Or who wants to give me feedback on the API, they can just click through this link and they can be taken right to the console where they can sort of begin to play around with this API. Now,
And
as
that
an
user
API
would have to be a collaborator on this project as well, correct?
That's right.
Okay.
For now. And so as a consumer of this API, what I really want to do at this point is talk about, like, give my feedback on the API, right? So it'd be lovely if I could go ahead and sort of mark one of these fields. So let's say over here on the app leaderboard, I want to say, hey, actually, I've been coding out my UI for this, and notice, okay, I have the name, but the name isn't really enough. If I want to show a leaderboard, I also want a bunch of points. So where do I get those points, right? I want to leave that bit of feedback somewhere. So people who know Hasura know that like they know the power of like modeling the domain as opposed to leaving modeling the API. And that's exactly what the Explorer tab gives us. So the Explorer tab is gonna instead of talking about the root fields in the GraphQL API itself, it's going to talk about the different models, commands, and domain in our domain. And this is really where I like to leave feedback. And you can sort of, so for our simple demo app, maybe it's easy to just say, hey, app leaderboard is where you want to leave some feedback, but let's look at a slightly more complex example. And here you can see that there are several different models across several different subgraphs. And now suddenly it makes a lot more sense that we don't really care if it's carts or carts by ID, because both these things come from carts. What we really want to do is leave our feedback on the model itself. So we could come over here, we could search for, let's say, a particular model that we know about, click through to that. And then what do we do, right? So the cool thing about the console is that every time you select one of these models or commands, the links over here are changing, which means the console actually supports deep linking. So if I were to copy my URL over here and then open that up in a new tab, I would go back to exactly that model in that build. So now you can sort of begin to see that if I wanted to present my API to someone else, this becomes an excellent way of documenting and sharing that API. So let's go back to our leaderboard over here and say, go to our Explorer. I'm going to click on this leaderboard and I'm going to copy this link, come back to my pull request, and I'm going to say, hey, for this leaderboard on this build, I'd like to add a points field. And this becomes a really efficient way of iterating on the API because we're iterating directly against the implementation. We have no additional steps of actually needing to document this out or needing to generate API documentation. And we're able to link directly to the bit of the domain that generates that API. So let's maybe run through that again. So I'm just going to go to my API, and I'm going to add points to it. So let's say let's also say perhaps that I want a limit. So I want to change the number of users returned for my leaderboard. So here's that change. Let me quickly create a local build. I'm going to reload my local API, and here I have limit, have only name. All right. And now I've made those changes on my local machine. And I can simply go ahead and share this directly with the other team. So let me go ahead and make a cloud build. And this is going to take a while again as it builds the connector on the cloud.
And so while that build is happening, right, just to kind of give an overview of this entire workflow. So we've received feedback in the PR, then locally on our machine, we're just doing some iterative testing, seeing how things look. And once we're satisfied with it, right, we're doing a new cloud build because what's the next step in this process? Like, what will we see after this build is done?
So you'd see the changes that I made and the changes I was able to run locally. You'd see those same changes in the cloud. I think what I'd consider over here is if I was developing with any other API framework and I had made changes on my local machine, like how would I actually share that with someone else for them to check it out and leave their feedback on, right? So what we perhaps do is commit that to a Git repository and then push that branch out. And then someone else would have to pull that branch down and then build that themselves, right? But here you don't have to do that because you just get a build URL and you can share that directly. And that's especially used to be a consumer of the API. Also, you could probably set up something like this in your CI/CD so that every time you push the branch, you'd get the build API directly. And the cool thing about these build URLs, these immutable build URLs, is that all of these build URLs are live at the same time. So I don't really have a problem. If I was doing another API framework, I'd be like, okay, I want to deploy this branch. Now, which machine does it go to? I only have one staging environment, right?
Yeah.
So whose branch lives on that environment? And all those problems sort of go away over here because for every commit or every piece of code that I change, I can immediately get an immutable build URL. And all I need to do is to take that same build URL and then drop it into my PR and say, hey, I made these changes. Added points. And that's it. Like that's an immediately executable version of the API for a consumer, but they don't have to worry about the implementation. They can just look at the API itself. And they can go ahead and run it. And when they want to give feedback on that API as well, no more fiddling around with additional pages somewhere else, or no more fiddling around comments anywhere else. You can directly leave your feedback against the executable version of that API with this deep linking. Cool. So that is pretty much what I wanted to share today. I think the tooling that we're building around the immutable builds around the deep linking in Explorer, we're sort of playing around with these workflows and sort of figuring out how to make the iteration loop tighter, because that's where the efficiency gains really start to happen. All right, that's what I want to share today. Thanks, folks.
Yeah, thanks so much. And just to address some of the questions that have been coming through in the chat, right? We're thinking that all this local dev is going to drop towards the end of next week. Like I said earlier, we're working on documentation updates, and we're really excited about what this, iterative workflow is going to look like for people locally, and then pushing it to cloud. And I'm sure that once we start making those changes, we'll very soon have CI/CD information in there as well, as Akshay pointed out there at the end. So thanks so much, man. If you've been on this call before, you know that sometimes we end up calling a few audibles in terms of the way that we sequence things. We're going to go ahead and have this MongoDB demo come up next.
Here at Hasura, and I am thrilled to show you what we've been working on with our MongoDB connector and DDN. I want to show you how we leverage native queries so you can tap into the incredible power that MongoDB aggregation pipelines provides you, all seamlessly integrated into our GraphQL API with DDN. First, I just want to cover, please go to hasura.io/docs under V3 and read all the docs here. Everything I'm going to cover is under the MongoDB native queries section. If you have any questions or feedback, please don't hesitate to reach out. Also, I just want to show real quick that we're using a basic e-commerce setup here. We've got customers, we've got products, and we've got orders. This is the JSON data that I've imported directly into my MongoDB database for this. And then really quickly, I want to cover when you do set up a MongoDB connector over DDN, you do have a couple of introspection options on how we introspect your database and collections. By default, we use the sample function and we sample 100 collection or documents per collection. You do have the option to use a validation schema if you're already using that within Mongo. So just change that to true, and instead of using the sample, we use the validation schema. And then we set all columns or fields in your schema as nullable by default. You can change that, and using the sample function, it will try to determine whether a field is nullable or non-nullable. Please be mindful that depending on the sample size you use, it is possible that a field could return, or the, excuse me, sample function could think that a field is non-nullable when in fact there is a null in the database, and so you could get errors when you query that, so just be mindful of that. And then we do have a schema folder here that does pertain to all the collections that are in your database. This is just the data, the JSON files and the data we use to generate the metadata for your supergraph. But what we're going to focus on today is native queries. Now, I've already set up a project, so we can just kind of speed things along here. But what I want to cover first is a simple pipeline. So if you do want to use native queries with Mongo, what you would do is add a native queries folder under your connector folder here. This isn't something that's here by default, so you just go ahead and add the native queries folder, and then you can start populating JSON files here for each of the native queries that you want to provide. In this case, I've done 3 already. The first one we're going to cover is simple pipelines. The name here is the name of the native query that we're passing in here, as we call it simple pipeline. The representation, you have 2 choices. You can choose collection or you can choose function. Collection is something that would return an array that you could limit, filter, and sort. And in this case, we are returning a collection, or we're doing a representation as a collection. The input collection is the collection in your MongoDB database that you want to run this aggregation pipeline off of. So think of db.orders.aggregate as what we're doing here. If you did not provide input collection, since it is optional, you could just not provide that, and it would be basically like running db.aggregate as the starting piece for the aggregate. Description is the description that users see, so they know what this field does, or what this query does. And then arguments, in this case, we're not passing any arguments in, so we're not exposing that. Result document type, in this case, is simple pipeline. As you can see under object types, I've specified what simple pipeline is, but if I was just returning customers or products or something, I could leave object types off and then just set result document type to customers or result document type to products. And then the last bit that is the meat of all this is the pipeline section. And this is literally just copy pasted from my Mongo shell. So this is my Mongo shell, and earlier I was seeing how I wanted to do this. And if I run that, as you can see, it returns the data that I expect. And so I just copy pasted that from MongoDB shell into here. And that is the native queries file. And so if we open our project, you can see I've already got everything set up here since I've already tracked everything. But if we take a look at running the simple pipeline, we get our query back. This is returning everything right now, but as I said, in this case, since we did it as a collection, we can say 10, offset 10, maybe say where quantity is greater than or equal to 90, and maybe we want to order by a total quantity ascending. And so we get 90, all of those are 90 in that case, but if we went the other way, you can see it goes 129. So another thing here, if you look at the trace for this, you have the option to inspect the query plan here that's been specified, the connector execution plan that we've set up, and then the database query plan as the pipeline that we've generated. And so yeah, that is a simple pipeline, a simple native query that uses a MongoDB pipeline. So next, let's take a peek at something a little more complex. So in this case, the big changes here is this representation is a function. The reason I chose function is because I'm returning a fixed set of data that I would not want to limit or filter or order by over. And so I've set it up as a function here. I'm still using my input collection as orders, and then obviously I've changed the name. I did specify the description here in the last 6 months, but as I noticed after I had already set this up, I did the pipeline as, where is this? Oh, sorry. Here we are, 1 month. So this is technically, my description's wrong, but that's okay. Result document type is a little bit bigger because we've got more fields here. So we've got all of the result document type, object types specified here. But again, you can see in the pipeline, this, again, I literally pulled directly from Mongo just to show how this works. Again, so let's take this, copy it, and then go in here with db.orders aggregate. And there we go. We've got our data. That's how I wrote this in Mongo shell, copy pasted, and this is what I ended up with. And so in this pipeline, what we're doing is, okay, so we're adding fields. We add this date subtract function based off of the current time, and then we convert the date string that we have in our orders model to an actual date, because it's just basically a string that has a date in it right now. And we do that so then we can match on it later and grab the greater than the last months, which in this case we did 1, even though I said 6. We have a lookup function to get the customer details. We unwind that, look up for products, unwind that, and then group all of that, and then have a facet to build that all back together in what we expect. And so if we look at that in here, we can see that running this query returns what we would expect. And so now we could use this for like a dashboard. So we could show the top customer spending in the last X months and the top products.
For the sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and cut Brandon's demo right here just to kind of make up for what we've lost. The third sequence that he was going to show us, and we'll have all these resources available as well, is going to be how we can use arguments inside of one of these native queries. But it's really cool that we can see all these kind of complex transformations that are happening out of Mongo being natively available inside of our API. So some very cool stuff happening there. And I'm going to call up one of our engineering managers, Jonathan Weiss, who's going to be joining us from the Great White North of Canada. So Jonathan, if you'll go ahead and join me on stage, we're going to talk a little bit about Elasticsearch, if I'm not mistaken.
So yeah, I'm going to do a quick demonstration of our Elasticsearch connector. It is a work in progress, but we want to get an MVP out in the next week or 2 weeks, something like that. That's our time frame. I'm going to demonstrate basically just from scratch how we get this thing up and running, how easy it is to get a GraphQL API generated out of an Elasticsearch index. And then the process is changing. As you saw, there's going to be a new local development process. And so the process I'm using now is a bit of a hybrid. So I'm going to be running the connector locally and pushing it through to our console. But it'll be simpler. And in fact, once we release it, either next week or the week after, it'll be on the cloud, so you don't even have to run the connector locally. So it'll be easier than what I show you, but what I'm showing you hopefully won't look that challenging. It's pretty straightforward. All right, so here I'm just I checked out the GitHub repo with our Elasticsearch connector. This one is written in Go. It's against our Go SDK. To get started with it, I'm basically going to run through the current README. This README is going to change, but these instructions will still be there. But we're going to augment it with a set of features that are currently supported by the connector. In any case, what we need just to get started for Elasticsearch is we need an Elasticsearch URL. I am currently just running Elasticsearch in Docker here, and it's a really very simple data set that my friends at ChatGPT generated for me very, very generously. Anyway, it's a very simple, this is just an Elasticsearch mapping. It's all running on localhost against my Docker. So nothing up my sleeve here. I'm going to go ahead. I've got a M variable file pointing to my local host. I'm going to go ahead and read that into my environment like so. All right, so now I have this stuff in my environmental variables. I'm going to basically just copy all of these steps into it. So this is going to build the executable. And again, we're starting at source here, so you'll see how quickly this goes. All right, so now we have our executable, which is here. The next step is we are going to generate a configuration using the environmental variables that I have supplied. It's going to introspect the data source. It was going to introspect, which it did, and it created a configuration in JSON, which will look remarkably familiar, right? So this is just the mappings for Elasticsearch. If I had multiple indices, these would all show up here. You can edit these if you want. But in any case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this configuration file to start out the connector. So it's the same executable, you'll notice. The serve command, if you give it a configuration argument, you have to point it to the directory where your configuration lives. It defaults to the current working directory. So I'm just going to go ahead and do it like this, and it's going to find this configuration. So now I have a server up and running up on port 8080 on my local host. And this is here. And so what this has done, it has read the configuration, and it has built out sort of basic object types and scalars and so forth that we're using for Elasticsearch, and specifically for this this index that I have, this very complicated, very simple data set. All right, so we have the connector up and running. The next step would be to build a project. So from here, we're gonna make this bigger. Create projects, demo. So now I've got my new demo, sorry, I've got my Docker stuff in the way here. Not my Docker, my Zoom things. All right, here we're gonna go into our new directory that we've just created, the ES demo directory, which contains our new project. Go ahead and launch Visual Studio so we can see what's inside here. I didn't give it a subgraph name, so by default it just produces app, and you'll see that the subgraph is currently empty. I'm going to now issue a command to add the Elastic connector as a type endpoint. So I'm going to end up, you'll see what happens, but it'll ask me for the endpoint pointing to my connector. And again, my connector is running locally. So we'll go back to Visual Studio, and now you'll see underneath app, we have an Elastic connector, and then inside connector, we have this Elastic build. Here, I need to add the value for the endpoint. I am tunneling this currently through ngrok, so it's available outside of my local environment. Again, when this is in the cloud, first of all, you don't need to run it locally, but second of all, with the new local development process, you won't need to do this tunneling stuff. Okay, so I've updated this per the instructions here. And now what do? I'm going to do what this next step is going to do is it is going to read this schema endpoint that is running out of the connector, because now it knows where my connector is because I just gave it the endpoint. It's going to read this schema, and it's going to build out the models and so forth that we need to actually build the project. So here we go. Okay, so we only have one model, which is test connector. If we go back here, you'll see models has been added. We've got the various fields that we have and the types of the fields and permissions and so forth. So the final step is just we're going to go ahead and build this thing. And this will give me a project that is running out on a console, which you've seen a couple times. And so here we go. So you'll see these are the fields that we've got. We've got address, email, name. So here's our basic Elasticsearch functionality out of the box. We can order. Let's do order by name. Start with ascending, and see Aaron and maybe a lot of Aarons. ChatGPT is really clever, but maybe not that clever. Anyway, lots of Aarons. We could do a descending to see what they do for Zed. That's for you, Rob. And there's Zoe and Zachary. So it's still a lot of Zacharys. Anyway, you get the point. So ordering works. In fact, I'm going to show you something about ordering that's a bit interesting. So here on the back end, this is the connector that I'm running locally. Again, the thing that started up on port 8080. You'll see that we've got the queries that are being generated. One thing to note is that we are using for ordering in Elasticsearch, there are subfields. And so these fields are defined. We can look at the mappings again. So name is where? Name is here. It's defined as a text field, but text field is not available for ordering or for aggregation in Elasticsearch. But we know that we have a keyword subfield here. So keyword is available. So on the back end, we're swapping in the appropriate type of subfield so that we can do the operation. And generally, we're going to do that. So for example, if you do a regex search, we're going to look for a regex or wildcard. We're going to look for a regex or wildcard field, a subfield. If you don't have that, we're going to look for we'll look for a keyword next, and then we'll default to text, which is just in Elasticsearch, text fields are tokenized. So if you do a search, it may not come up the way you think it's going to come out, whereas keyword, it's the entire text of the field that's going to be searched. So when you do regex, it'll work in a way that's a bit more obvious. Maybe I'll show some of that right now. So let's do, first we'll just do a match with name. Well, yeah, we'll do a match with Zachary, since we know there are about 1,000 Zacharys. And here we go, Zachary, 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 lots and lots of Zacharys. If we do, let's make that into a regex, and we'll do the same thing. We'll just do Zach star. So here we've got Zachary Young. Again, if we look back here, you'll see that we're using the keyword. We're using the keyword field here instead of the text field. And we'll just pop this into, this is just a postman, which most of you know. Get some stuff around. Gives us a terrible, terrible error because I copied that wrong. Sorry, just a sec. To this, maybe that's what we want. Okay, so it'll give us this result, but I think if we get rid of, just have this in the field, we have no hits. So this is what I was saying, because it's a text-only field, the regex doesn't work in a way that's intuitive. So we're swapping it out for the keyword version of the subfield on the back end. So yeah, we have all our basic functionality. We do, by default, Elasticsearch limits results to 10 instead of 10. Let's get rid of some of this stuff. So we're going to order by name descending still. Let's get rid of the where clause for a minute and just show like how you could basically do some quick pagination on this. So we limit 10. Now, if we want to offset and get the next data set, let's offset it. Sorry, let's offset it by 9. That way, in theory, we should have, sorry, I've got Zoom. So we should have Zachary Stafford should be our first person in the next data set. And it is Zachary Stafford. We could do the same thing, again, here, 18. And it's whatever, Zachary Hamilton. So, and now we're finally looking to be out of the Zach universe here. We got Yvonne. So there we go. So yeah, so this is what we have for our MVP. So we've got filtering, we've got sorting, we've got ordering, all the basic functionality. We are working on nested fields, which are a bit of an anti-pattern with Elastic. But we're developing that actively, and so that should be coming out next. That won't be in our MVP. There are a few other things that we're still working on, like a range operator is something that we're still working on for numeric types. But I think that's basically it in a nutshell.
That's perfect, Jonathan. Thanks so much. We've got some questions or maybe some enthusiasm that came through in the chat, I would say. So some people seem really excited about Elasticsearch, which is great to see. But yeah, you'll be around for a little bit as we go into these next sections. So if anybody has questions in the chat about Elasticsearch or the connector, go ahead and throw them there. And thanks so much.
And also, just to pitch it, the enthusiasm about Canada also would be more than welcome. So anyway, with that.
Well, luckily, I'm kicking you off the stage, but I'm bringing another Canuck onto the stage now. So joining me is going to be Jeff Strickland, who is co-founder and CTO of Tactable, who is a longtime Hasura user. Just while he's getting himself organized and coming up on the stage and finding that webinar button down at the panel at the bottom. Jeff, how are you?
Doing well. How are you, Rob?
Doing well. Thanks for your patience. I know we were supposed to have you on a little bit earlier, but just given the joys of doing live demos like this, and I mean, shouts to your fellow Canadian for not only doing a live demo, but writing regex in a live demo. Like I've never seen somebody do that. So hey.
I was gonna say I really appreciate the live coding there. That was something to witness.
100%. So do you want to give us a little bit of an introduction and background as to who you are, what Tactable is, and then we can sort of jump into the Hasura bits after that?
Cool. Yeah. I'm Jeff Strickland. I'm the CTO and co-founder of a Toronto-based software consulting firm called Tactable. We specialize in cloud transformation and migration. We do a lot of data pipeline work, data integrations, and as of late, we're doing a lot of work in the Gen AI space. So for a lot of our clients, we work with them on their cloud infrastructure, the data pipelines, and the next sort of logical step there is to hold their hand through this new AI journey. So lots of interesting work there.
Yeah. How about personally, just your background, your experience before you went to Tactable? Tell us a little bit about, how you got into the industry and how you ended up at Tactable, co-founding it, that kind of thing.
Cool. Yeah. I'm a software engineer by trade. I did a lot of work in the ad tech and fintech industries. So we founded the company, me and my partner, around 5.5 years ago. And it was just sort of born out of, we were working at this one company, and it was a bit of worked with some of the smartest people I've ever worked with, but we just weren't shipping products, weren't doing anything. It wasn't the most collaborative environment. And we really wanted to build something that kind of had our values in the DNA of the company. So, we set out to build our own thing and really wanted to focus around cloud native development, because that was sort of the thing at the time. A lot of Kubernetes based systems were coming out. ECS and Cloud Run were only just announced. So it was a cool time to start kind of getting into that space.
Yeah. I love how you mentioned cloud native and then collaborative approaches, and we're going to come back to that in just a little bit. But I'm curious, kind of from the forefront of when you folks started Tactable, if I'm not mistaken, Hasura was kind of part of your stack from the beginning. Is that right?
Yeah, it was interesting. So we got our first contract with a pretty large company. It was actually two large companies, Rakuten and Shopify. They had a joint venture where they wanted to build a connector so that people could sell their Shopify goods on the Rakuten Ichiba storefront, which is one of Japan's largest online retailers. They're sort of like the Amazon in Japan. And so we knew some people in Shopify because we're Toronto based, and the folks at Rakuten, they were looking for a smaller agency, Toronto based. The executives there have a lot of agency with their budget to do what they need. So, using a smaller agency, they could come in under budget, get the work done. So we had this project, fixed fee, we had so much, we quoted it at, so much, X amount of dollars, X amount of months. And from our perspective, starting out as a small company, we were really looking to optimize and cut down the scope and find efficiencies. So at that point, I was just looking for any way to trim scope, and came across Hasura, which was alpha at the time. This was 5 years and change ago.
Wow.
So at that point, I was like, this looks amazing. It's pretty dicey that it's alpha, but we were in the process of kind of hammering out the details and scope of the engagement. So I took the time to do some proof of concept work. Deemed it to be stable enough to take a bit of a gamble on it, and we built our system around that, and it's been running smoothly for 5 years.
Gotcha. So like when it was in the alpha stage way back when, how exactly were you folks using Hasura to help cut that scope and help accelerate things? And then how has that changed over time? Because 5 years is a long time, and there's been a lot of maturity and a lot of growth in the product itself.
Yeah, well, we used it essentially to be like a backend as a service. So my kind of thought, and my goal, or at the time, was, we're building out this application. I have my database, I have my schema, I have all my data in there, and I was like, I just want anything that gives me access to my data instantly.
I don't care if it's ugly. I don't care if it just how it gives it to me. I just didn't want to have to like have the overhead of writing APIs, controllers, unit tests. And so that's when we found it. And, it was a pretty mature product for an alpha build. And we basically leaned on it to be our backend. So, we would leverage it for database migrations. A data explorer tool helps us write our GraphQL queries in the console. And yeah, really, like I said, we leaned on it to be our backend. Let us focus on modeling our data, building our app. Focus on how we want to structure the front end and just give us our data how we want it while we're developing.
I gotcha. And so you mentioned Shopify in the beginning. Are there any other like larger enterprise customers that you folks have been working with by like integrating Hasura into their stacks as well?
Yeah, so that first project that got our company off the ground was Rakuten and Shopify. That went well, and so we had a great relationship with the folks at Rakuten, and so they were actually spinning up another joint venture with Walmart. So it was Walmart USA and Rakuten Japan. They wanted to create a Walmart marketplace in Japan so that Walmart US could sell their products overseas. They had tried something in past that didn't work very well. So this time it would be like Walmart powered by Rakuten. And so because we had done a good job on the Shopify stuff, we had a good relationship. They looped us in to build that out. So right now there's a Walmart official store on Rakuten, and basically every Walmart product that's sold in Japan is running through the system. So products are synced, orders are kind of synced back and forth. And there's a third-party shipping provider that's in that joint venture that manages the last mile delivery from US to Japan. And this is another system that we built this all around Hasura because we had used it so successfully on the first thing, saved a lot of time. It was pretty bulletproof that we were like confident that this was the move for the next thing. So that's a pretty big one, and it's pretty high profile. And once again, I think that has been up and running for 4 years now, and it's just been pretty bulletproof.
Wow. I feel like we hear that a lot from folks in the community and, even on the enterprise side, right, of Hasura kind of becoming this backend hub for all these different, not only services, right, but these different domains and different organizations kind of all coming into one central, for lack of a better term, repository. So that seems to be a really common pattern. But I'm curious, just kind of forecasting and looking into the future, what kind of trends are you folks seeing with your clients, thinking about ways that Hasura can be integrated into future projects or how DDN is going to be involved? Just kind of curious what you folks are thinking about.
Yeah, I think there's a common problem that it's not necessarily a new problem, but I think a lot of companies are at a much further stage in their kind of data maturity these days. But an issue is data silos within organizations. So, big enterprise companies, they have many different databases, many different departments, and these departments and data systems, like they're just, you don't have access across these kind of great walls. So, analyst A wanting data from data silo B, it's just like impossible. They have to put in a kind of formal ticket for some other team to go into their backlog to create some kind of way for them to get access to that data. And so what we're seeing a lot of is companies wanting to kind of converge those silos or put in some way of accessing data across them with role-based access, so that internally people can, self-serve their data, which allows the businesses to move faster. And then at another level, we're seeing a similar issue where above an organization, there's kind of cross-organization data sharing that people are trying to do. So company A, company B, and we've actually talked to a client that has sort of many companies that want to share data amongst them, but a big problem is data stewardship. So they all want to share their data, but they all want to own their data. And this is something where I think the DDN is a really interesting thing because you can create essentially a super graph where everybody can be a steward of their data, but then stitch it together at a higher level and kind of democratize that. So that's like a big thing that we're seeing. Every company we talk to has data silo issues, and more we're seeing more companies wanting to share their data across organizations. And Hasura is like a great option for doing that both within an organization and now across organizations.
Yeah, that makes me think about a couple of things that I've heard that we have, internally coming down the pipe in terms of ways of kind of controlling builds for certain subgraphs and making sure, that stewardship piece that you're talking about is really respected while still making the access as easy as possible and being able to democratize and share this data across an organization. I'm curious, I have like one more question before we jump into kind of the final bit to wrap up. You mentioned how your company, right, you're getting more and more into like kind of doing generative AI work for clients and customers. And I'm just kind of curious if you've thought through like, inclusion of AI workflows with event triggers and kind of how it sort of fits into that.
Yeah, there's the low hanging fruit with event triggers that when you write data to the database, you can use an event trigger to generate the vector embeddings and pump that back in. That's not even like a creative solution. That's just sort of like the obvious way of leveraging some of that with Hasura. And so that's my first thought. We haven't really gone down that path so much with Hasura yet, but I've been exploring, and at Google Next, I was talking to some of the guys, and they told me that there's some interesting things on the roadmap for that space. So kind of looking forward to hearing a bit about more what the team has in store there.
Yeah, totally. Speaking of Google Next, that was a fun few days, and it was good to meet you there in person. For anybody that's on the call right now that's a little bit more curious about Tactable or about you and the work that you do, how can they reach out? How can they find out more information?
You can go to our website at tactable.io or shoot us an email at info@tactable.io.
Awesome. And I assume you're on the socials, and maybe you've got rants and opinions that you're throwing out there. I don't know if that's so common anymore with Twitter's devolution to X, but if you're around, can they find you anywhere?
I try to stay off the public social things, but
Likewise,
they can find us on LinkedIn.
Okay.
Reach out. Love to chat with anybody that has any questions.
All right. Jeff, not to downsize Jonathan, but you're my favorite Canadian on the call today. Thanks so much for being here with us. Thanks for taking the time out of your day. We look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thanks a lot, Rob. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right, folks, let's wrap up this community call. We had one more segment planned that was going to be going over an RFC for permissions. However, we are going to push that just because we've gone so far over on time. We will share a link in the follow-up email for all of this for where we're looking for some early community feedback around this RFC. We want to remind you as well that we have Discord office hours every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time. You can join our Discord server and then jump in and talk with engineers and community folks from Hasura, get your questions answered, or just chit chat about what you're building, all those kinds of things. As always, a few helpful links for you. We're always looking for feedback. We also have the opportunity in every single one of these calls to be just like Jeff and come through and showcase your project. So you can share information, or you can actually go to that link right there and share your experience with us and possibly be on the call itself. And let's see, finally, we will see you in the next call, which will be our 44th, I think, in June. Other than that, hope our summer's off to a great start, and we'll see you folks online. Thanks so much.